Time for Tartarian Tales 32 with some business and trade practices in China/Tartary. And we'll see again, they could be interchangeable. Who knows? The past is very interesting. They got conquered back and forth, so on. But one of the things that's really cool about this is I combined the Pinto book, which is his chapter that I'm going to read, and then I found this this 1800s book of ancient artwork or different scenes from ancient China, Tartary, and it's got incredible, not only amazing art, but unbelievable scenery and different clues and different items and sites that are just unbelievable. The construction, the architecture, the detail, the boats, the art, everything is just absolutely amazing, spectacular, magical, and infinitely superior to now. No matter how many lights they put on a building, it's not as cool as these things. And they, I'm sure, served a purpose as well. So let's dive a little deeper into some business and trade practices in China and see what has and has not changed over the course of however many years it's been. So here we go. Business and Trade Practices in China, Chapter 97. After departing from the ruined city of Fayunganors, we reached a large, very prosperous city called Zhongquinalao, where all kinds of things were available in abundant supply. Its streets filled with many very distinguished-looking people going about on horseback and on foot, and the harbor teeming with an enormous number of vessels, from oared craft to huge sailing junks. We stopped in the city for 5 days because our chifu wanted to arrange for the funeral of his wife there, for the sake of whose soul he distributed charity to all of us there in the form of both food and clothing, releasing us from the punishment of the oar bench and giving us liberty to go ashore whenever we felt like, without having to wear the iron collars and shackles, which was a tremendous relief for us. From here, as we continued our journey upstream all along the river on both sides, we saw many fine cities and villages and other good-sized towns surrounded by strong, massive walls, with rock-built castles along the shore, as well as many towers and sumptuous shrines belonging to their heathen sects, all topped by belfries and spires covered with gold leaf. In the fields there was such an enormous quantity of cattle that in some parts the herds covered a distance of 6 or 7 leagues, and there were so many vessels on the river that in some places where they were holding fairs it was impossible for the eye to take them all in, to say nothing of many other smaller conglomerations of as many as 300, 500, 600, and 1,000 sails we met up with all along the way on both sides, where as wide a variety of things as one can name were being offered for sale. Quite a few of the Chinese told us that in the Chinese Empire there were just as many people living on the rivers as in the cities and towns, and that if it were not for the highly organized system they have of providing for the working people and of regulating the businesses and trades in which they are forced to make a living, the competition would be so fierce that they would probably eat each other up alive. For every line of work and trade that men live by is divided into 3 or 4 different fields of specialization. For instance, in the poultry line, let us say ducks, some men are just allowed to operate the egg hatcheries and the raising of ducklings for sale. Others specialize in raising the ducklings to maturity for killing and selling them cured. Others deal in feathers only, in the entrails and giblets, others only in eggs, and a man engaged in any single one of these operations is not allowed to mix into any other on pain of 30 strokes of the lash, a penalty for which there is no recourse either to appeal, protection, influence, or anything else. In the pork business, some make their living as wholesalers, selling the pigs alive on the hoof. Others only handle them for slaughter and selling them at retail. Others for cutting them up to be sold as cured meat. Others specialize in the sale of suckling pigs. Others in chitterlings, lard, feet, blood, and edible organs. In the fish business, the one who sells fresh fish is not allowed to sell salted fish, and the one who sells salted fish is not allowed to sell dried fish, and so on. With all other lines of fresh food, whether it be meat, game, fish, as well as fruits and vegetables, all of them are subject to the same rules and regulations, and no one is allowed to switch from one kind of dealing to another without obtaining a license from the city council, and even then he has to show just and lawful cause or face the penalty of 30 strokes. There are also other people who make their living by selling live fish swimming around in large tanks or pools of water, loading them onto many oared barges where they are kept in watertight compartments and carried alive to many far-off places. Also, all along the shores of this great Batampina River, on which we made our way from Nanking to Peking, which is a distance of 180 leagues, there are so many sugar mills and presses for making wine and oil out of so many different kinds of fruits and vegetables that there are entire streets all along both sides of the river, 2 and 3 leagues long, that are lined with these food processing plants, which is certainly enough to stagger the imagination. In other parts, there are many warehouses stocked with an infinite supply of provisions and just as many other rather long buildings, like storehouses, where they slice, salt, cure, and smoke every kind of game and meat that is found in the land, and they are piled high with stocks of ham, pork, bacon, ducks, geese, cranes, bustards, ostrich, venison, beef, buffalo, tapir, yak, horse, tiger, dog, fox, and the meat of every other kind of animal on earth, which left us all gasping with amazement, as one would naturally expect, at such an unusual, astounding, and almost incredibly marvelous thing, and many a time we would say that all the people in the world could not possibly consume that much food in one lifetime. We also saw on this river a large number of ships they call panuras, which are similar to the foist, their decks covered from stem to stern with woven reed cages like chicken coops, each measuring 2 spans tall, stacked 3 or 4 on top of each other and crammed full of ducks that men were carrying to be sold. These men travel up the river under sail and oar or however they wish, selling these ducks for a living. When it is time to feed them, they bring the ships in close to the shore, picking a marshy spot with some pools of water, and they lay planks to the ground and open the doors of these cages. At the sound of 4 beats of the drum, all these birds, numbering as many as 6,000-7,000 or more, leave the ship with a squawking and head all in a rush, straight for the puddles in the field. When the owner decides that they have had enough time to eat, he beats the drum again, and the moment they hear it, they let out the same loud squawking and go back on board the ship they came from, with each one resuming its place in the same coop, and without a single one being lost in the process, after which the ship continues on its way. When it is time for them to lay their eggs, the owner puts into shore again near some dry field with a good cover of grass, opens the cages carrying them, beats the drum again, and the minute they hear it, they all go ashore to lay their eggs. After an hour has passed, or whatever length of time he thinks it takes them, more or less to finish laying, he beats the drum again, and then they all rush to get back aboard the ship without, as I say, a single straggler being left behind in the field. Once they have found their places on board, the owner and 2 or 3 others who work with him go ashore carrying baskets, and when they reach the grass that has been whitened by the freshly laid eggs, they gather them in their baskets and return to the ship, and not a day goes by without their collecting from 10 to 12 basket loads, after which they proceed on their way, selling these wares for a living. And whenever their supply of ducks runs low and needs to be replenished, they buy them from the other people who also make their living by raising and selling them wholesale to these retailers, who are not allowed to raise them as the others do because, as I said before, no one is permitted to deal in anything other than what he has been licensed for by the city council. The people who earn their living by raising the ducks have ponds near their houses where they keep as many as 10 or 12,000 ducklings, some smaller, some larger than others. And in their hatcheries, which are very long buildings that look like warehouses, they have 20, 30 ovens packed with dung in which they bury 200, 300, and 500 eggs at a time, keeping the dung warm by covering the mouths of the ovens and letting them stay there until they think they are about ready to hatch. Then, in each one of these ovens, they install a half-plucked capon, wounded in the breast, and cover the openings again. Within 2 days, the capon has finished hatching them all, and then they put them in certain places underground that have been prepared for them with their bran mush inside. Then they are allowed to roam free for 10 or 12 days until they find their way by themselves to the ponds, where they are raised until they grow large enough to be sold to those retailers I mentioned, who in turn transport them for sale in various places and who are not allowed to raise them, as are the people from whom they were purchased, under pain of being sentenced to 30 strokes of the lash for doing so, for a dealer who specializes in one end of the line is not allowed to step over into another man's specialty. These regulations are so strictly observed that whether it be on the street, the public squares, or any place else where food is marketed, if a man licensed for duck eggs is found with chicken eggs, presumably for sale, they punish him right there on the spot where he has been caught with the wrong merchandise, by administering 30 lashes on the buttocks without giving him a chance to explain. And if he wants to keep them, he must show, in order to escape the penalty, that they are slightly cracked on top, to make it look like he was saving them for his own dinner. And what applies to one also applies to the other, not one whit more, not one whit less. Also, Also, those who sell live fish have to keep them in large tubs of water with reeds strung through their mouths so the buyer can hold them up if he wants to see how big they are without squeezing them or dirtying them or otherwise damaging them. And if a fish should die, they have to slice it up and salt it immediately to be sold at the price fixed for salted fish, which is somewhat less. That way, no one breaks the rules and regulations imposed on him by the conchalis of the government, who are like our market inspectors, under pain of being promptly and severely punished for it, because the king is so highly revered in this country, and his administration of justice so deeply feared, that not a single person, no matter how important he may be, dares to open his mouth or raise his eyes in the presence of any representative of the law, though he may be only a simple upo who wields the whip and whose function is similar to that of the executioner or bailiff in our country. So wow, very interesting. Kind of gives you a little glimpse of maybe perhaps where all this regulation in America has come. After we were free, it seemed like the last maybe 50 plus years, they've been regulating everything. You have to get a license for this. You have to get proper education for this. You have to pass this exam in order to do this. You can't do that here. You can't do this there. All this kind of stuff seems very similar, and it seems very different to a lot of the times in America, where especially you could just sell anything anywhere you want to do. And there's still some places like that where you can just go on the street, don't need a peddler's license, and you can sell things in different places and times. But everything is coming closer to the way it seems to have been back here when China ruled. Everything's strict, everything making sure everybody fears punishment. People get punished in public. It's like a social score system. All this stuff, very similar. It's just crazy how it's creeping back into our world. We had freedom and amazing prosperity for so long, and now it seems like just some of these ancient ways that have perpetuated in other parts of the world are creeping in our country, and we can't let it happen. We have to remain free. We have to remember that this stuff, this regulated world, is not what life should be. It's not what the world should be. We can do much better, and we will. Bless you all.